and I will share. Okay. Now, last time I think I stopped here. Do you have any question before I begin? Any question, boys, girls?
No, no question.
Okay. Now, really, as maybe you have seen or looked at this, we meant by point of view, the narrator. What kind of narrators we have, and I told you, and I think this is always, I think, clear by now, should be that fiction or stories or novels or poems, to some extent poems, there is a speaker, there is a narrator who might not be the same as the author. The author would always borrow someone, would always assume someone, would always assume another character or another personality or what we call another persona to speak in his voice or to speak in his or her voice, So this is why we call this in English narrator. And in the novel, on the story, we say narrator. Sometimes narrators could be different from authors, You could be an old man and you could have a narrator who is a young man, for example. You could be a man author, but you could use a female narrator, and so on. So being a narrator means someone who is speaking all the time in the text itself and the actual words themselves on the page. This is what we mean by the narrator. As I said, it's something like the author, somebody who is behind the author, someone who is hiding always behind, if you like, the author, or the author, I should say, really is behind, hiding behind the narrator. So there is this kind of mutual, I think, connection here between the two. So that's why here I say fiction writers never admit that they tell the story themselves. They usually resort to an assumed personality, or I say a persona, which is an assumed I and mine. The real writer himself remains hidden behind the world of his story to remain or retain his freedom and action, if you like, to keep his choices open and to facilitate a constant shifting of positions as he likes. I think this is, if you like, artificial, if you like, really, to say this. Authors do this because they are not characters, Authors create characters out of imagination, out of the blue sometimes. So therefore they can't be the same. Okay, so that's what I mean here, to have choices or to have freedom and so on. He does this in order to be in complete control of his material at all times. After all, he's the one who creates everything in his fiction. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, when you say the author says, the author believes, the author does, and the writer believes, and so on. Yeah, of course, because he is the one who made the characters, and he is the one who created also the narrator. So the whole thing is done by the writer. Yes, absolutely. So that's why here we say the writer adopts a distant position from the events and commissions someone else, or the narrator here, to perform for him this important task of telling the story. This means that the author dictates on the narrator what he says or what to say. For narrators do not exist without their fathers, the authors. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying here. I'm saying that the writer always assumes, always borrows, always uses a different persona to say, you know, to narrate the story, to tell what he wants him to tell. You know, because I'm saying the author is the one who writes, you know, the real person who is writing this. But he's using, as I said, assuming another character who is telling the story, you know. This is what I mean. I mean, this is only done in fiction because writers always do this, you know, for, I think, as I said, to make it easier for them to tell the stories. So I say it is through the narrator's eye and maybe mind that we as readers observe the characters and all the events of the story. That's what we mean. So the narrator allows us to see what is going on in the novel, for example, or what is going on in the story. The narrator can tell you and may not tell you. The narrator may hide or may not, etc. But again, you know, to be honest, again, to say, doctor, yeah, but this is the author. Yes, yes, I agree with you. It's the author. It is the author. But the author makes his narrator say this and, you know, to do this and to do that and so on. So that's why we say here, point of view then is the position or the vantage point from which the narrator allows his readers to see the action. Yes, it is the place from which we see the action. How the narrator allows us to see the action in the story or in the novel. And I say the vantage point, yes, means really the prestigious point whereby we can see everything. It's the high point by which we can see everything. You know, this is what we mean, the vantage point from which the narrator allows his readers to see the action. And really, this is why we say, when he says, you know, it's the narrator of third person narrator. We see through his eye, who is an absent man saying he, she, they, etc. Whereas when he says I, you know, it's his own direct voice. It's his own direct speaker, you know, and this is what we mean. There are two general narrators, I say. Two general narrators. The first person narrator and the third person narrator. Each of the first and third person is again divided into another two types. We say the first person or the I narrator can be either first person observer or first person participant, either to be a character who is participating in the action and telling the story, or he could be someone like this sitting and watching and saying what he sees in front of him. So he would be observer. That's what means observer, not actually participant. So a participant is someone who is a character as well, because he's taking part in the action. Okay, so again, we say third person narrators also can be divided into omniscient or limited omniscient. Again, here, when I say omniscient or omniscient, again, someone who knows everything. Omni means everywhere, you know, multiple. Omnipresent, omniscient, or limited omniscient. Someone who says, I can't tell you everything because I don't know, you know. So this is what we mean here by omniscient or limited omniscient. Again, we say here we have what's called objective narrator. Objective narrator belongs to both categories. Again, we say a first person objective and a first person subjective, and a first person or third person objective and third person again subjective. You know, this question of objective and subjective again really means to really not to interfere. You know, objective, someone who is really objectively saying things without interfering. Whereas subjective means he interferes, he gives his own opinion. So I'll explain this in details for you today. Notice. So I say the objective narrator belongs to both categories, the first person observer and third person narrator. In other words, many critics say that the objective narrator is the third type of the third person narrator. Very quickly then, let me say, first person narrator can be a character of the story and can tell us everything he chooses about the story and the characters. But the third person narrator or a he voice cannot be a character in the story. You know, this is the difference. This is the difference, really, between, you know, a third person and a first person. A third person can't be a character. You know, say he voice can't be a character in the story because he stands at a distance, you know. But sometimes you may say, well, but a character who says, I saw this and I did this and I believe this and I worked this and I said this. And when sometimes he says, you know, he's speaking about somebody next to him or some other character next to him. He says, he says, or she says, or she does, or he does, or they, you know, did, etc. And I did and we did. You know, in this case, when he says he, could be like, in this sense, you say, well, he's using third person. No, because he's the first person originally narrating the whole story. Again, this will be clear when I give you examples. So I'm saying he voice can't be a character in the story. He stands a distance from it and observes what goes on in the world created by the writer. He stands at a vantage point, can enter this world and leave it at will, and he can enter the minds of the characters, comments on them and judges them the way he wants. Yeah, you know, like for example, the comments I mentioned to you last time about Matilde, and when I read for you the whole page when it says he or she is, she, blah, she, he goes on and on and on to tell us about her mind, about her character, about her mentality, about, you know, his own beliefs about her. So he goes on and on and on to judge her, to say a lot of things about her. So this is what we mean by, you know, giving details and, you know, entering her mind to tell us everything, what she thinks and what she does and what she believes. And this is what we call judging a character. So third person narrator can be a judging, a lot judging or giving opinion. Well, you can say to me, well, yeah, also a first person narrator can say that. Yes, yes. A first person also can interfere and can tell us a lot about what he thinks, you know, about other things. Yeah, of course. So the third person omniscient narrator means the narrator who knows everything about the world of the story and his characters. You know, this is what we mean by omniscient, really from the word omnipresent. Notice omniscient or omniscient, I say it in both ways because many people say omniscient or omniscient, right? Or omnipresent. That is, he can be everywhere and with all characters at the same time and at all times, you know? And that's why we say, well, this is really impossible. In real life, this is impossible. This is impossible. How can a narrator be in London and at the same time can be in Paris? How can be in New York and be in London at the same time? In one page he's in London, the next page he's in New York. Well, in real life, this is not true. It's impossible. But you see, in fiction, it is possible. You know, this is the idea. Narrators in fiction can exist because they are, I say, omniscient or omniscient or omnipresent, means they are present everywhere. And that's why narrators, I think I've heard this many times by writers, they say, you know, writers or narrators are like gods, you know, gods, you know, here small g, of course, meaning they can do everything they want. They are like gods. They behave, they do things, and they exist in, you know, in all places at all times. And this is impossible for humans. Yeah. So really the idea to say narrators or writers do that. they show you this ability. That's what we mean here. He can be everywhere and with all characters at the same time and at all times. He's free to record the thoughts of all the characters and to comment on their attitudes and their despair or motivations in life. A third-person narrator or omniscient narrator, he judges them the way he likes. And we, as readers, have to follow his comments. Whether objective or positive or whatever comments, we have to accept them. Otherwise, because how can we know? How can we say no? How can we say, well, I don't believe you? How can we? We are not fair, I say again here, we see everything in the novel or short story through his own eyes. We see everything through him. In other words, he puts his own discourse at the very top of this international or this narratorial hierarchy of discourses. Here I'm using, some kind of terminology, meaning what the narrator really says and believes and attitudes and thoughts and beliefs and ideology and discourse. Here I'm saying discourse is the whole kind of language that he's using. We can't deny it. We can't say you are a liar. We have to accept it because he's the one who's telling us. He's the one who's telling us. There's no way. So he always puts his voice as the highest, the most important voice. And that's what I mean by hierarchy. There is a kind of hierarchy, like a pyramid. And the man here would be the narrator on the top of this pyramid. Okay? This is the idea. So I'm saying at the very top of this narratorial hierarchy, as the upper figure who knows everything about his characters and their fates. The narrator can also be called the editorial omniscient. Well, this is the same. Editorial means who is always editing and adding and maybe not deleting, because the word editing could be deleting and adding, right? So we say editorial omniscient and can't be or can't fully be trusted since he can say anything he likes about the story and its people. Really, this is again far-fetched, absolutely far-fetched and artificial thing. At the end of the day, you can say to me, oh, doctor, what are you talking to us today? Authors are authors, yeah, they make everything. They make up everything. Authors are authors, yes, absolutely. Writers are writers, yes. They are the one who sit and write. Yeah, absolutely. So why are you saying to me, narrator, 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 narrator? Come on, you gave us headaches. Huh? Did I give you headaches this morning, Suha?
No, doctor, you didn't. Actually, I have a comment on this thing. I mean, the narrator and the writer.
Yeah, please.
Well, the narrator is different from the writer because sometimes writers themselves don't know what the character will do. I mean, through the writing, they figure out the action, some of the characters, and sometimes they also change all they might change some of their beliefs through the writing. So they are different. Even if the writer writes the narrator, he gives them the freedom to do whatever they want to do.
Very good. Suha.
Yeah, doctor.
Do you write anything yourself?
Yeah, sometimes.
Hmm?
Sometimes.
You see, by the way you say this, I thought that you might be writing something. Very good, Yasuha. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, very, very good, Suha. Because writers sometimes, for example, we have a writer who's writing a novel about a criminal. For example, somebody who is a criminal, but the writer is not a criminal, for God's sake. You understand? But sometimes you, as a writer, you have to follow what the criminal wants, because he's a criminal, he's a killer, for example. How he behaves, the character then will dictate the writer to say what the real character wants. And that's why sometimes they say writers have to do this, because they have to follow what the narrator, at the end of the day, what the character really needs. Because since you are involved in this situation, you have to go on and complete it, because you are forced to complete it, because your character needs to finalize things in this way. So you have to go with him in this way or in that way, and so on. So yes, absolutely. Sometimes authors really, sometimes they lose control. They lose control over their things. And this is absolutely true, what you say here. Because again, of course, especially this is done in modern fiction. Especially this is done in modern fiction, or modernist fiction, or postmodernist fiction. When writers say, well, I don't know, I can't control my characters. They have the freedom to do what they like, and I can't control them. And sometimes they say, oh, I don't know this character. Of course, again, these are really tricks. They are fictional tricks, and they are really, if you like, fictional twists and tricks done by authors. So really, this is the idea I'm saying, that sometimes really writers do this to say all these things in a sense to if you like, amuse, I think, mostly to amuse his readers, or to do all these things, if you like. So again, here I go back to the when I say the third person narrator does not make such comments, and so often limits himself to recording what he sees externally and in the minds of all his characters. He is called a neutral omniscient. And this is really sometimes, again, it is possible that, because you see, it's very rare really to say a narrator who does not comment, a narrator who does not interfere, a narrator who does not judge, because narrators always judge, and they say things what they want to say. So I'm saying here that sometimes third-person narrators who are neutral narrators, again, these neutral ones, I think they are very rare, So, but we still have, we call this neutral omniscient narrator. When he enters the mind of one or only a few characters, to the point, for example, the point of view is called selective or limited omniscient. Again, limited omniscience. Yeah, sometimes he selects to interfere or to judge here, and sometimes he does not want to judge others. So this is again the idea about selection, to say, I want to do this, and
I have a question.
Yeah.
If the narrator is judging, do we call him subjective?
Yeah, of course. Of course, subjective, because he's giving us his own personal subjective idea. Yeah, of course, subjective. Because his commentary may be his own. Maybe he does not like this character.
But he's writing about this character.
Sorry? Yes?
I mean, he's judging the character, but he's writing about the character, but sometimes he don't like the character.
Exactly. For example, if I show you, for example, we have a very great example, really. Have you ever heard of a novel called Jane Eyre?
Yes.
Jane Eyre is a great 19th century novel written by Charlotte Bronte. And Jane Eyre is a main character in the novel, and she's also the narrator as well. Because she said, she always speaks in her voice, okay? Now, sometimes, the way she speaks about other characters, although we meet these characters, for example, on their own, for example, later on when she is in love with Mr. Rochester, and we know Mr. Rochester to be a nice man, a good man, blah blah blah. He has so many friends. He's a rich man, and the story really is very interesting here. Later on, what's her name? We said Jane. Her name is Jane Eyre. Jane, she falls in love with him. But because she's a governess, she's a poor girl, and she's working for the master as a private teacher. She's teaching his own kids. But she fell in love with him, and he's a master, and he's a rich man, and he's receiving people. And she started to get jealous of the people that they come to his house. Especially he invites people, rich people like him, because he's a rich man, really, he's a bourgeois character. And he's her master, So, he received, he invited so many people. The most important thing that he told her that he's going to be engaged to this lady called Miss Ingram. And Jane, of course, doesn't know. She has not yet seen Miss Ingram, right? She hasn't seen Miss Ingram yet. And then, because she's in love with Rochester, she started to hate Miss Ingram without seeing her, because she's jealous, because she loves him. She does not want anybody to love him. So she started to paint pictures of Miss Ingram, terrible pictures, ugly pictures of Miss Ingram, although she has never seen Miss Ingram. You understand? Boys and girls?
Yes.
Exactly. This is what Sumaya, I think, said. And this is what we mean by, very personal, subjective. And sometimes we say later on, when we start to feel sorry for Jane, because Jane is in love and blah, blah, blah. We like her because she's our heroine, our main character. We listen to her, we talk to her all the time. And we start to like her and to love her, okay. But when we see Miss Ingram, we don't hate her, but Jane hates her. You see, we know why, but you see what Jane says about Miss Ingram, her name is Blanche Ingram. The way she describes her and so on and so forth, it means it is very, very personal and very subjective. And maybe not true. Maybe some people say, hey, Jane, you are too jealous. Come on. You are too jealous. And this is the idea when we say about absolute, judging or misjudging or commenting and so on. You see what I mean? Yeah.
So we call this the first person narrative? This novel.
Yeah, first person narrative, yes. Actually, I have the novel with me here. Let me show you. Let me show you the text.
It's an English novel.
Yeah, of
England.
course. Yeah. Have you read it?
I have seen it before as a movie, I think.
Yeah, very good. Let me show you here. I have the text here with me. It's a soft copy test. Let me, a soft copy edition. Let me share it and show it to you. And I will tell you what I mean. Yeah, this is Jane Eyre. This is the first page. Jane Eyre, an autobiography by Charles Bronte, published 1847. Now, this is the preface by the writer, but let me show you, for example, when the narrator, notice here all the time, this is chapter 1, beginning of the novel. Notice, there was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering indeed in the leafless shrubbery, etc. And then she goes on. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight with nipped fingers and toes. And again, here you can see this is Jane speaking, telling us the whole novel. But you see, sometimes Jane herself is acting as a narrator, but a first-person narrator judging others. Notice here how she judged others. She said, the said Eliza, notice, I was glad of it. And notice she said, saddened the nurse and the humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. These are her cousins. And now she judges her cousins. Notice she said, the said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mama in the drawing room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the fireside. Now here we see Jane as a first-person narrator telling us about other characters, judging other characters, and interfering with their, especially when she said, clustered around their mama, because she's using here, she's mocking them. And when she said, the said Eliza, John, and Georgiana, again, the way she describes them, notice, with her darlings about her, again, the word darlings, because later on we know that Jane is not one of her darlings because she's not her daughter. She is her stepdaughter, if you like, and they hate her because she's not their child. Notice, for the time, neither quarreling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me, she said, she had dispensed from joining the group. Notice here the first person narration. She's telling us and judging others. She said, me, the one she's speaking, notice she's narrator and character. Jane, narrator and character. Saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance. Notice here, Jane is quoting her aunt, because Mrs. Reed is her aunt. And Jane here is quoting what Mrs. Reed says. She regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie and could discover by her own observation that I was endeavoring in good earnest to acquire more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and spiritually manner, something lighter, franker, more natural, as it were. She really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. Notice here, of course, this is Jane quoting her aunt said this. Her aunt said this, and she's quoting. How do we know? Who said that to her? We have no idea. Again, this is, of course, could be what somebody else, maybe here Bessie, the maid, another maid. Notice, what does Bessie say I have done? I asked. Again here, of course, she goes on and on and on. So here what we mean by first person, directly, and sometimes interfering, and many times judging, and sometimes we believe her, sometimes we say, hey, wait a minute, you are going too far. especially later when we see the character later on, as I said, when we know Miss Ingram, you know, we say, oh, I think this is too much, you know. And this is really a lovely novel. I don't know, one day, if you have time, please read it. It's a great novel. It's an absolutely great novel, very lovely romantic novel. If you have time, ever have time later in your life, I think you should read it, because it's a great text, absolutely great. Yeah, let me go back to my maybe little business here. Yeah, any question? Questions? Hello?
No questions, Doctor.
Okay. Maybe everybody they went back to sleep. Allahu A'lam. How do I know? How do I know that you? Maybe you went back. You went back to your beds. Could be you are having breakfast or having a shower or something. You switched on your my machines, and you went for a journey. Yeah. Well, I will find out later. I'll find out later. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let me go back to my yeah. So this means I say that all the events of the story are narrated through the eyes of one character, and also all the other characters are particularly known through that character. The third type of narrators is the objective narrator. Okay. Right. Let me take the attendance now. Muhammad Saeed. Muhammad Saeed Ahmad al-Rawahi. Suha here. Saud Humayd Saud At-Tubi.
Yes, Doctor, I'm here.
Ahmad Khalfan.
Here, Doctor.
Funun.
Yes, Doctor.
Ahmad Salim.
Yes, Doctor.
Marwa.
Here, Doctor.
Buthaina. Khalfan Rashid. Buthaina. Haneen.
Yes, Doctor, I'm here.
Haneen or Buthaina?
I'm Haneen.
Good. Noor.
Here, Doctor.
Abdullah Muhammad.
Yes.
Razan.
Yes, Doctor.
Sumaya, I think I've heard her. Do I have
Present.
another Sumaya? Two Sumayas? No. Yeah. Idris?
Yes, Doctor, I'm here.
Okay, so we have two people absent, Buthaina and Muhammad. Okay. Right. Let me go back to my sharing. Yeah, so the third type we say here is what we call objective narrator. As I said, he's the one who does not comment, one who does not judge, one who does not interfere really, and abstains from editorializing and from entering the minds of his characters. He limits himself to recording or narrating the events or what he sees. Objective narrator can be either, again, I said, third person and first and third person. And as I said, you know, these narrators are really rare, if you like. Okay? In both cases, he tells the story like a historian recording history and so on. So the next here I say about the next sentence, or the concluding sentence, such a narrative mode requires intelligence and assimilates the situation and relays it to the reader. But if this narrator is a child or a naive man, his point of view would be then described as an innocent eye. Well, again, there are no innocent eyes, you know, sometimes. Well, very rarely, to be honest, very rarely we have innocent eyes, because we always judge. So I'm saying here, this leads us to the uninnocent eye. This is the idea. Because Jane here, I say, she's never innocent in the sense that she's not interfering. I mean, Jane as a girl, really, as a young girl, she's 17. Here at the beginning, she was a young child. She's absolutely innocent, yes. And she's saying this because she was treated in a horrible way, yes. We understand why she's angry, yes. But maybe she's exaggerating, yes. You know? So this is the idea. Because she is a first-person participant. She is a character and narrator. Okay? We say he is both narrator and character in the story and takes part in the action and also takes sides among his characters. Here we tend to identify ourselves with this narrator. As I said, we identify, we feel sorry for Jane. Yeah, because she's the one who's speaking to us all the time. Yeah, and so on. You see, we get involved emotionally, we like her, etc., etc. And I think this is very obvious all the time. That's what we do. This is an important advantage of this point of view that can be added to another one when we see that this narrator can be a minor character who can observe and relate a little more, and so on. So again, here we say the first person participant narrator, however, has some obvious disadvantages. When you are a narrator and participant, sometimes you sometimes can't be somewhere else because there are things which you can't see. You know, this is the idea. When a participant narrator participates directly in the action and shows his own personal opinion of other characters, it means that he favors parts of the story and some other characters in complaint. Again, here, of course, I say in compliance with his own vested interests. You know, like what I said about Jane, when she hates Blanche Ingram because she hates her because she's jealous, you know, and that's what I say, vested interests. That's why he's almost always unreliable in telling the story or telling the truth. You may say, if you like Jane, you say, yeah, she's telling the truth, but really maybe we don't know. So she's not completely reliable to tell the truth because she is part of the action, you know? And that's what I mean here. Notice the truth about the events and the characters, since he relates his own side of the story, right? Another sign of his unreliability is his limited freedom of movement, which the reader, of course, can see while reading. Unlike narrators who stands, or narrator who stands outside the story, like the Eyre narrator, who cannot be in two places at the same time. You know, that's what I'm saying. If you are a narrator character and you are in London, how can you be in Paris? But you are in London and you are a character in London. You know, this is the idea. Whereas a third person narrator who's outside the story, yeah, he can be in London and Paris at the same time. And this is, of course, the idea. Okay, so that's it, boys and girls, about narrators. And I think, you know, this is really very important subject that we have to know very carefully in our readings whenever we read fiction. Now, the next point is simple, really, the word style. And I think is very clear the word style, which is again, that each writer writes something, or the language, the kind of language, the kind of, for example, difficult, easy, sad, miserable, scientific, brave, philosophical, etc., etc., etc. Are you using poetical language? Are you using simple language? And all this is called style. We say style, which covers everything about your story. So really here we see the language used in the word, how the words are chosen and the way they are put together, and so on. Style is the distinctive way of employing language to produce the maximum effect to the reader. Style is the writer's distinctive manner of speaking or manner of expression to suit his or her ideas. As I said, could be sad, could be happy, could be comical, could be miserable, could be scientific, could be fantastic, could be unbelievable, like the science fiction and so on. So the style really here controls or covers a lot of stuff about the whole nature of the novel, the whole nature of the story, or what's in front of you. So this unique imprint, notice here what we say, هذا الطابع الفريد. This is the translation for it in Arabic. Unique imprint really here means you give your own picture, your absolutely unique picture of your writing by whatever language you're using. That's why I'm using the word unique imprint of the author's personality upon his own or writing. Style is the product of an author's way of arranging ideas and his or her own use of diction. Different sentence structure, rhythm, figures of speech, rhetorical principles, blah, 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 blah. All these really is called style. You understand?
Yes.
Like, I'll give you an example really. Like me, Mahmoud, here, speaking to you today. By now, you know how I speak, how I lecture. Maybe you don't know me in real life, but you know me now in front of you. You can see me, correct? Yeah, you say, this is the way this man. Of course, the other professors, are they doing the same thing like me?
No, everyone is unique.
The idea that the way I do it, maybe you don't like it, I don't know. Maybe you like it, I don't know. But this is the idea, this is what we mean, our imprint, our really amazing, unique character, really. And this is what we mean by style. Maybe this style is maybe good or bad or whatever. That's another question. And really that's what we mean here in fiction. We use the word, we say the diction or discourse as appropriated within the social context or situation of the characters. So I'm saying, notice here, the kind of language really, the type of discourse, what I speak, how I speak, what language I use, and so on. This is what we mean by, again, style. When I say appropriated, means how I maneuver around, how I harness my language, how really I use my language in a certain way to make it really punchy and to make it really wow, to make it really clear and effective. And again, to go back to the context, here, for example, I'm contextualizing to you my idea here about the word style by the way I say it, by the way I move, by my voice, by my hands, by my gesture, by my tone, etc., etc. This is really what we say, if you like, contextualizing, if you like, the whole idea. So authors really always contextualize their novels and stories, and to make them really attractive and lovable. So it's really quite essential here to say what kind of discourse, if you like, or to know that discourse. Suha?
Yeah, Doctor.
How do you translate discourse to Arabic?
I don't actually know.
Anybody? Boys, girls, discourse in Arabic, one word. If you don't know, that's not, I don't blame you really. I'm too ambitious. I'm too ambitious to ask you this question. Sumaya?
Conversation. حوار.
Conversation. حوار. Haneen? Anybody?
Yes, I think
Discourse.
like الحوار.
Like al-hiwar. I think you are right. Sumaya and Haneen, you were close. Actually, we use the word in Arabic, one word, we say al-khitab, khitab. We say you are using a special khitab for me. I don't like this khitab. You know, it means I don't like the way you speak to me. This kind of language you are using, it's not good to me, for example. We say khitab. Haza al-khitab means kind of language, the type of language, a special or bad or whatever language. For example, I say, for example, we say, you know, like, for example, we say in many societies, you know, teachers or educated people have a special discourse. They use a special discourse. Educated people, villagers use a special discourse or a discourse of their own. Taxi drivers, they speak also, for example, a special discourse of their own. Students, for example, male students speak a language which maybe female students don't speak. You understand? So really, this is what we mean by a discourse or some kind of discourse. And it is sometimes political, it is social, it is maybe ideological, and so on. You know, it has so many other, if you like, toning, if you like. It's really colored with so many other really factors. So that's why the word, when somebody says discourse, it means a lot, not just a language, you know. For example, educated people, when they speak, they want to convey a message, not just the language that they speak. They want to tell you, hey, we are educated, we know how to use the language, we want you to be like us, blah, 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 blah. And sometimes, for example, taxi drivers or poor people or Bengali people or Indian people, for example, in the Gulf area, because we have so many, for example, foreigners, like, you know, expatriates, like whoever they are. For example, the way, for example, they do things is not the way that, like, for example, other people do, and so on. So this is what we mean by discourse, really, in this way. Yeah, so I'm saying it's quite essential to know that discourse reflects the social relationships of characters to each other and to society. You see, this is what I'm saying. Diction means the selection and arrangement of words in a literary work. Either or both may vary depending on the desired effect. For example, we say there are 4 general types of diction. We have formal diction, like in a scholarly way, like, as I said, university professors or university people or educated people or rich people or whatever. And also we say informal, used, for example, by relaxed, but educated. Again, you say colloquial, which is everyday speech, or slang, which is really containing newly coined words and sometimes really not good words. Slang could mean bad language. Yeah. So this is it. Writers sometimes, writers use this. In a story, you find formal English sometimes, you find informal English, and sometimes you find a lot of colloquial English, and sometimes you have a lot of slang English. And you say, come on, why? Well, this is it. Because writers have a message. For example, when they use such a language, they have a message, you know? So that's what we mean by style. Discourse, again, I say, really means how a certain group of people use, and this is what I said about you, about, you know, the word discourse. I explained it already, and here I'm saying it. Really means how a certain group of people use language to express their own feelings and attitudes. It is the special and different mode of expression for each one of the characters. Discourse reflects what is happening inside the characters and reveals their suffering and their conflicting motivation. Again, we say could be the style employed throughout the story, be it descriptive or dialogue, has to be taken seriously as one important feature of fiction. Style is not just a matter of language and diction. It is really not just that. For example, somebody will say, for example, I'll tell you one good example. You know, many English people today and many Scottish people today and many American people today, they don't use grammar. They use, for example, they say, we says, I says, they says. You know, they say, we is. Come on, is this English? Is this grammatical? If you say to me, we is, I'm going to fail you in the exam. So you see the idea here, they did it. For example, they do it because they say, hey, we belong to a certain class and we don't like the other classes. And this is our way of saying things. If you like it, you're welcome. You don't like it, get lost. Get lost. Yeah. And you can't say to people, why are you saying this? Why do you speak like this? You know, they would say to you, well, this is the language. This is our language. How do you say this? How dare you say this to me like that? Yes. So it's social, absolutely social, ideological, political, very tough. You can't say, you know. And I think this is especially clear if you read American fiction, especially how slaves, how black people speak, because they do it deliberately to deform the language, because they do it deliberately, politically, really politically engendered, and so on. So that's what I mean, discourse. Okay? Each writer or each story here, I go on, I say, we have allegorical discourse or symbolic discourse or ironic discourse, or I should say diction or style, really. And the same thing here, I say. So I say each writer in each story has to have an individual distinctive style, largely determined by the subject of the tale. It can be allegorical, it can be symbolic, it can be ironic, and, you know, imaginative, and so on. Like when I say an allegorical style, you know, using allegory, right? And we say allegory, we don't say allegory. No, you say allegory, stress at the beginning, is the one which has a meaning behind the surface meaning. It's really very suggestive, suggestive. Like fables, and you know, we'll come to this later. In that, it is generally, I say, it generally conveys a message and teaches a moral lesson or a religious lesson. Fables, again, I say here, and parables may be classified as allegory. They narrate one coherent set of events or circumstances, if you like, which signify a second order or correlated meaning. They are always symbolical. They mean something else. Always they mean something else. Sometimes what you read in front of you is not exactly what is meant. You have to know what is beyond. And that's what we mean by allegory. It's like, again, we say, figurative style, which is full of figures of speech, techniques, which is always full of metaphors and similes and, poetical language, because you want to convey more and more images in that. Ironic style, again, which is using comedy and irony and sarcasm and satire, to use for, to criticize society, sarcasm, I say comedy or irony, I think these are all, if you like, part of what we call, if you like, ironical style or comical style or sarcastic style or satirical. There are all kinds of comedy here, all kinds of really, attacking society through mockery, through satire. Again, say comedy is employed to make social criticism, usually found in realistic fiction. Yeah, and especially when you read Dickens, and you read Jane Austen, really lovely examples. Charles Dickens, in his novels in the 19th century as an English author, and Jane Austen as an English author, she was a great example of irony. She uses irony in a lovely way, absolutely funny and lovely and effective and very strong and very touching, really. Okay. Again, we say the action is meant to make us not as real, but as illustrative of human traits, exaggerating human weaknesses, such as greed and lust and so on. Because in satire, for example, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, a great example of satire. The best satire in the English language is called Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift, the English, he's actually Irish, the Irish writer, Jonathan Swift, in his great novel called The Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels, it's Gulliver, the name Gulliver, and his travels. And he has horses in this novel. Most of the characters are horses, which is really amazing novel. And it's absolutely full of satire and full of criticism, really harsh satire. Here, I don't know, did I mention? Yeah, it's here. You can see, yeah. I mentioned his name here, you can see. It represents a picture of a crazy, irrational world where there is nothing or no social value to trust. Great examples of comic novelists are Henry Fielding, William Thackeray, and Charles Dickens, whereas Jonathan Swift is the example of incisive satire and sarcasm. Of course, here I don't mention the name of books, but I mentioned them when I spoke the sentence just earlier on. Okay, so I think that's it about style, and I think we don't need to carry on about it. I think that's enough. Now, 5 minutes, I think I can do this. Tone and atmosphere. Again, I think I explained this in so many ways. Really, tone and atmosphere is similar to style. Again, when I said sad or serious or comical or, the kind of language. Yeah, the tone. Are you happy or are you comical or are you serious? Or are you joking or are you crazy or what? So this is what we mean by the atmosphere. Is this sad novel or sad story or good novel or whatever, So in reading fiction, we say always a special tone or attitude the writer or the reader feels about the author and his material. And there is always this kind of mood, again, we say, the mood of the story. Tone and atmosphere are then interchangeable with the attitude and mood. This is what I'm saying, interchangeable. Tone, atmosphere, like mood and attitude. Mood and attitude. Are you sad or happy, crazy, comical, sarcastic, scientific, realistic? All this is to do with what we call tone and atmosphere. The tone could be a sad or happy here. I say that, the same thing. I think it's very clear. Tone is the attitude displayed by the writer or narrator towards his action. Again, I say the intonation, the way, the written word. Again, it's the straightforward statement or the unmistakable question which the writer raises. And if we like, again, you say tone is, we say, implies and clarifies the intention of the writer, narrator. It is the way in which a writer presents his material, and so on. So the tone really is important. Sometimes if you are joking and if you don't understand the joke, and really this would be very difficult because you say, come on, I'm joking. If I say to you, well, this is a joke, so you should know that this is a joke. Otherwise, if you take it seriously, you say, wait a minute. Doctor, you said something I don't like. But I say to you, come on, I'm joking. You say, no, to me, this is not a joke. You see? So this is the idea that we have to understand the tone of the writer to understand really what he really wants and what is the value of what he says. In fiction, as in reality, there are many ways of expressing feelings and emotions, and therefore the tone of the narrative will be clear from the endless variety of feelings or emotions of compassion, of scorn, of delight, of sarcasm, of irony, and so on, which are all, if you like, they are all, here used by authors, by the author. The narrator's tone, for example, will either reinforce the meanings of this text or turn it upside down. So really the tone can change the whole thing. And of course, it depends how you speak, because especially in speech, people understand the tone more, right? As, for example, often done by a writer's choice of names, which reveals his true attitude towards his work. For example, the choice of names. Like, for example, Dickens gave us great examples of how using his characters' names, even from the name of the character, that this writer is laughing at this character. Dickens was amazing man. He is amazing. I think the best man ever to use names in fiction to mock and laugh and satire and ridicule characters and people through his fiction and through the naming of his characters, how he names his characters. The best example, I say, to exemplify this attitude is Dickens. Charles Dickens' choice of names in many of his novels and the subtle ironies used in novels such as Oliver Twist or Hard Times or Great Expectations, or in Hardy's novel, Thomas Hardy, like, for example, the name Gabriel Oak. Look at the name, Gabriel and Oak. This man is very strong and very solid and very good. He's an angel like Gabriel, Jibrail. Wow, he's an angel, is he? And oak. Oak means very solid, very strong wood. So our character here, Gabriel Oak, in that novel called Far from the Madding Crowd, is, here really much. If you like, the name means a lot here to the name, the choice of name. Of course, I did not give you the other funny example by Dickens because they are funny and some of them are ugly, but really they are very amazing, really. For example, Henry Fielding used the character called Mrs. Slipslop. Her name is Slipslop, Mrs. Slipslop, Mrs. Slipslop, you know, who is an amazing character. Check her name if you like in you know, in references or in the net. Again, the narrator in the character we have in our short story we'll see soon. Here I say, like Homer Barron, the name Homer Barron is ironical because in looking at his relationship with Emily, one discovers that Homer is neither a Homer nor a Baron, but is just a hero antagonist who embodies the central conflict in the story with the heroine, Miss Emily. We shall see this later. I will show you that with a rose for Emily and the name Homer and Baron. And I will tell you later on what is Homer, the meaning Homer, and when he was really never a Homer. And the name Baron, again, he was never a Baron. So the writer there, he was very ironical and comical and sarcastic. He was mocking him, laughing at him, and killed him, you know, in an ugly death. Later on, I will show you that in our study and analysis of the story. Okay, boys and girls, I will stop here and I will continue next week. Next week, I will finish this. And please read the next story we have. Not stories. We will do these parables. Please look at the first few parables here for next time. Okay? And the fables and parables. Next time I'm going to do that. So please look at them, read them, prepare them for next time, and try to listen all the time, as I said, to the previous videos, because really they are really useful for you to have another view or another idea